Welcome to the third C in the program Sail the Seven Seas to Sensational Storytelling. In the first two videos you learned about circumstances and characters. The third C is conflict. Conflict is critical to any good story. Remember this phrase, no conflict equals no story. Why do I say that? Let's take a look at a couple of examples from the world of movies. Imagine in the movie Star Wars, if Luke Skywalker was told by Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke, Darth Vader's your father. Imagine if Luke's response had been, really? Huh, interesting. Oh well, maybe I'll run into him from time to time down at Mos Eisley at the cantina, but otherwise I got too much work to do. Not very compelling response, is it? No conflict. Think about Indiana Jones. What if in the beginning of that movie, instead of this huge boulder rolling down at him, it had been a rock maybe about this big? Probably he would have escaped and there wouldn't have been a lot of tension. So conflict is critical if people are going to be interested in your story. Here's a critical element of conflict that most storytellers leave out. Conflict must be increasing. It has to build tension as the story goes along. The best example that I can think of is the movie Titanic. And by the way, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Titanic, and it's 2015 at the time of this recording, I'm guessing if you haven't watched it in the last 18 years, you're probably not going to go out and rush it right after seeing this video. Although I highly recommend it from a storytelling standpoint. In the movie Titanic, what is one thing that you knew going into that movie? That's right, that boat was going down. No doubt about that. So why is it that we stayed in our seats for 200 minutes, 3 hours and 20 minutes? Because director James Cameron made such compelling human interest stories. And what he did beautifully, which was a metaphor in the movie, was that after the Titanic hits the iceberg, he slowly increased the water level. And periodically he would cut out a scene from the water level rising, go back to a couple of the human interest stories, and come back and the water was rising. It was a metaphor within that movie for the increasing tension that was happening. I mentioned before, most storytellers don't use this technique. What they do is if they introduce conflict at all, they keep it at one level. That's very similar to those moving stairwell or moving walkways that you see at the airport. There's no tension. It just kind of goes along like this. What if in Titanic, director Cameron had shown the Titanic hitting the iceberg, had some water come in, maybe up to a certain level, and then stopped, and you just kept telling the other stories? No tension. But the opposite end that I see some speakers do is they'll jump from a point of conflict and then escalate it so fast that you don't have time to build the tension. The best analogy I can give you there is like getting on an elevator, going from the first floor to the 10th with no stops in between. Imagine if director Cameron had shown the Titanic hitting the iceberg and then 2 minutes later it's dropped straight to the bottom of the ocean. Again, no tension. So it's very important to slowly build that up because that maintains audience interest. In the story about Judy, there were two types of tension being built in that story. From Judy's standpoint, the tension was her husband had just died. She's in the middle of all this grief. But she's worried not only about how she's going to get along without him, but she's got this business to run. And as she looked into the future, she could see it only getting worse because she didn't know financially how she was going to be able to handle it. From my end, the tension came from the years of where I was embarrassed, even ashamed to sell life insurance. To the point where I wouldn't even call it life insurance. I came up with all these different names. And my friends and family were making disparaging remarks. So that got worse for me over the years. So the tension built until the next scene, which helped Judy and me overcome our concerns. But that's another lesson. For you, your job right now, because this is the assignment part of the video, is to take a close look at your story and determine where is the conflict. There's a central conflict that has to build throughout to increase the tension to keep the audience interest. And as you're thinking about that, gradually increase it. Don't do the walkway method, don't do the elevator method. Gradual increase will keep their interest. As you get your feedback, ask people only for that portion of the story, did you sense a rising conflict? Get the feedback, make adjustments, go out and test again. That's your assignment. In the next video, you'll learn about the climactic moment where the lesson is learned. Until then, always remember, you have a story that someone needs to hear.